Lord of the Rings, the card game, The Treason of Saruman. This is a saga expansion that is one of the expansions for the game that are directly inspired by the Lord of the Rings, not just by the setting in a general sense, but by the plot of the Lord of the Rings. The third in a line of 6 expansions covering the 6 books of the Lord of the Ring. This covers the first half of the second book, the first half of the Two Towers. And it does so with a set of new characters, new other cards that you can add to your decks, and also 3 scenarios covering the main events. If you remember the 3 events, well, the main events of the book, you know that there's going to be a lot of variety. And I think that among the saga expansions, the ones that I played so far, I'm playing them in order, this is one that adds that has the most variety. The scenarios are really vastly different from one another. That certainly presented some challenges at the design level, but also it shows the flexibility, the incredible flexibility of the system. One thing is if you invent a game system and then you come up with scenarios, stories, challenges that meet the system, that match the system. Another challenge is when you have to match your system to a script which is very specific and of course has been created by other people. And I think the scenarios in this expansion in general does a very good job of tailoring the mechanics and the affordances of the game to the plot and content of the book. But let's talk about what you actually find in this expansion. First, we'll talk about the cards that you can add to your decks to strengthen your decks, to give you means to face the challenges in the scenarios. As you may know, in the saga expansions, there is a sphere of influence, which is represented by this ring here, is the Fellowship. In the previous expansions, there was always a version of Frodo being the character that represented that sphere of influence. Here, for the first time, we have another character. We have a version of Aragorn, which is pretty good, is an ally that is good to have, but as in the other cases of a character with this sphere of influence, the first player gains control of the character with that's fine, but the trick, the small print, is that if this character with this sphere of influence leaves play, the players lose the game. By the way, his action is pretty neat because you can spend resources from his resource pool to ready a hero. That gives him a great leading capability, the ability of directing heroes to do multiple things in a turn. Sweet, nice hero to have. And I have to say, much more interesting than the versions of Frodo that I found in the previous 2 expansions in the saga line of expansions. Now we have Theoden, a nice Rohan hero, whose main skill really is to bring other Rohan allies into play. He's pretty expensive as a hero to have, very good stats, but really for his action to be maximized means that you have to do some work to create a Rohan-centric deck, which personally I own many of the expansions, not all of them, and I'm finding it a little hard. I just realized that there aren't all that many Rohan characters out there. A friend of mine has a Rohan deck, which is mainly centered around them. I had to ask him how he did it because I'm finding it that it's a little hard. So in any case, what I'm saying is that this is a good character, but there is some commitment that you have to the Rohan cause to create a deck that maximizes his ability. And if you followed my other videos for Lord of the Rings, the card game, you may know that I'm a little bit of an Ent lover. I really like them. Well, I like them in the books, and I really like them as characters in this game. I like what they do. They're a little slow to come into play, but tough as heck, and they do really good stuff once they are there. Very thematic too, by the way. Very expensive hero to have. Good stats, good surviving abilities, and his action is to you can deal a damage to him to increase his stats until the end of the phase. If you combine this, since he's in the green sphere of influence, if you combine this with the healing effects, which are common in this sphere of influence, then you have a really powerful character here that you keep hurting, healing, and he goes out and simply bashes things and destroys things, or lends a really good hand when it comes to questing. Other end cards that you find in this expansion, because of course this is expansion that covers a section in the book where you do have the ends, when the ends are a massive, a very important presence. You have End Event that allows you to search the top 5 cards of your deck for any number of end cards. That is really neat. They're not very fast. This makes them a little faster. It gets them into your hand faster. However, this is a green card, which makes sense, but I just noticed that most of the end characters that I have in my collection from the various expansions that I have mainly seem to be of the red sphere of influence. So there are some green ones too, but I think this card would be really maximized if I created, and maybe I will, a red-green deck that really is centered around the ends. A little bit of specialization here too. This is an Ant character, an Ant ally, Quick Beam. Yeah, it seems a paradox. The quick ends, where does the world come to? But there is a cost that is, well, very good stats, as you have in so many Ants. It enters place exhausted like every other Ant that I've seen so far, or at least any other Ant ally. And then, however, you can give him a damage to ready him so he can enter the game ready. And if you're just sending him to get punched by a monster to delay an enemy, then of course this is a nice thing to have and to do. The Androt, you play when you control at least an end character, because you do need to get that from somewhere. You attach it to a character, and the character is reinvigorated and gets extra hit points. Then we have Gimli, a version of him, which is really nice. The stats are all right, but his ability is that after an enemy is revealed from the encounter deck, you can ready him. So really nice flexibility and multitasking abilities here. Legolas, the ally version, we already had a hero version of him. As you can see, the stats are exactly the same, but at least these ones. The ally version has a little less survivability. It's pretty expensive to bring into play. And also his response is based on participating in an attack that destroys an enemy. It's a little less spectacular here, but it can be very powerful. So very nice ally. I'm glad that there is a version of him that I can use in a deck as an ally. Now, another card that works well in combination with him, but also with any hero, because you can attach it to any hero or to Legolas. And after the attached hero participates in an attack that destroys an enemy, again, that is a trigger, exhaust this card to place 1 progress token on any location, which is pretty much similar to what the hero version does. So it intensifies that ability, or gives that ability to others. We're talking about the raw hand and how it would be nice to have more of them. I'm sure there are somewhere in there. A friend of mine made a deck mainly with raw hand. I just have to find those sneaky raw hands. Where are they hiding? But we do have a raw hand warrior in here, and this character here gets extra defense until the end of the phase, but at the end of the phase you discard him. It's also like final stand type of thing. An item that needs to be attached to a raw hand and reduces the cost to play Hergin on Theoden by 1, so it's specialized, and also you can exhaust this character to add as the quest value to the attack value. Finally, again, one here that has to do with the raw hand guys. Exhaust and discard and run LU control to choose and discard a non-unique enemy engaged with you. Very neat. Finally, we have a mount for Gandalf, super specific, but it allows you to ready Gandalf. There's so many other effects that have to do with Gandalf too. Nice card. It's a little specialized. You will really need to do a little bit of work, I think, to maximize their effects, but nice cards. When it comes to the game effects, to the game scenarios, the game starts. The three scenarios here start with the Hurukai, where you are following. Well, the Fellowship has just split at the end of the previous Saga expansion, and now you're following a group of heroes that are following the orcs that kidnapped several of them. Several heroes. So it's a scenario that is based on movement, is based on making good time and running after the orcs as the orcs are sending bad dangerous enemies against you, as this big brute here is in the staging area and bothers you from the beginning. Also, there's this card here that is into play at the beginning, that forces you, based on the scenario instruction, to get rid temporarily of one of your heroes. You put heroes under here, and those heroes cannot participate. As I've said in a previous video about the Angmar Awakened line of scenarios, there's a scenario in there where you also cannot use all of your heroes, you cannot use all of your stuff in the beginning. It is very thematic, but it's something that mechanically I don't like as much because I spend so much time building my decks and creating decks that I want to use, selecting the heroes that I want to use. And then when it comes to playing the game, I want to use all that I have in my deck. I guess it could have been done in a more abstract fashion, simply saying, well, some of the heroes are here. So if I have a deck that has 3 heroes and I use 1 here, well, that is a challenge there. It could have been said, use your deck, and the heroes that are here are simply heroes, so the people that are here are simply prisoners that were not in your deck. Then, of course, you would need to adjust the difficulty to take into account that. But you could have the same scenario, the same situation, without depriving you of your heroes, and the same level of difficulty too. Just the values in the system, in the scenario, should have been tweaked a little differently. And there is another scenario in the system also where you are not in this expansion, when you're running after a party of orcs and you do not have to be deprived of your heroes. That is to say, it's not a bad scenario, not my favorite one, because you cannot use all of your heroes, and to me that's a limitation. But don't worry, the next 2 scenarios are really unique, and I find them thematically as well as mechanically excellent. The second scenario is where you're defending Helm's Deep against hordes and hordes of enemies that are coming your way. So you're defending the fortifications of the place, and there's stuff that you need to do. Well, first you get a quick stage where you can get some resources, then the bad stuff happens. And here you have an interesting situation. In this scenario, if you fail to quest, you do not raise your threats like it happens in other scenarios. What happens is that the scenario is trying to put progress on these cards. This time you don't want progress to go on the quest cards, because the quest cards represent the fortifications that you are defending from the armies of the enemy. So if progress tokens are placed here that destroy a stage, you go to the next, and then you go to the next. And if the 4 level stage is destroyed, is completed, you lose the game. Yes, it is the game that is trying to complete the quests, and you are trying not to let them. And this is a scenario that is heavily combat-based. There are just hordes of enemies that come out of the encounter deck, and you're constantly trying to drag them out of the staging area to prevent them from adding progress tokens to the cards. So you're constantly trying to fight them and eliminate them, but they just keep coming. Interesting enough, you can use normal locations as a buffer. You can make them the active locations, so when the encounter deck is adding progress tokens, the fortifications, the active location is destroyed first, and then you get more tokens in here. So interesting situation where you are trying to prevent progress and the encounter deck is doing the progress, and they'll do it because these cards do not take many progress tokens to be destroyed. And again, the flood of enemies that the encounter deck generates it's intense. But how do you win the scenario then? Well, there's this card here that is in play, and first you add some threats to the staging area. Oh, great. Also, at the end of the quest phase, you place a resource token here. If there are 8 resource tokens, then you add this other card to the victory display, but most importantly, you advance to stage 5A. Remember, stage 4A is the one you get to if the encounter deck makes good progress in the scenario. If you resist long enough, if you hold your own for long enough, then this card becomes the active stage. The king rides out, so you have a decisive action that finally may bring things your way and may allow you to win the game if you meet the scenario, if you meet the victory conditions. Very unique, very different. Yes, there are the scenarios that are based on combat and simply surviving for long enough in the game system. I've seen this kind of scenario before, but this implementation is very unique. It's very neat. I found that giving the deck the task of making progress and you the task of preventing the encounter deck from doing so didn't feel gimmicky as I thought, as I feared, when I first read the instruction of the scenario. I really enjoyed it. And then I really enjoyed the third scenario where you finally go after Saruman, the guy behind all the mess that you have been dealing with, and you cannot do it alone. You need the help of some ends to tear down the walls of the place so that you can have access to your arch enemy. And there's a scenario of all the ones that I play in Lord of the Rings, a card game that probably has the best narrative construction, the best narrative structure. It really tells your story in a phenomenal way through game mechanics, which is remarkable. The scenario starts with what is pretty much a mini game where you are performing actions. I won't give you the details, where you're performing actions to get and allies. So you will start the scenario with a number of these allies with you. The higher the number, probably the longer it took in the mini game, so actually the more bad stuff you will have to face later. That is the nice trade-off. You can spend a lot of time convincing the indecisive ends, and then in the meanwhile the enemies are more prepared, or go in kind of like half-cocked and see what happens then, which I would not recommend. It's better to spend some extra time, but get your army of ends with you because you really need them to tear down the place. Then you need to break the city, and here in the scenario the way it works is that you have to destroy locations, and the ends have a special ability in this scenario to do so. So you really have the situation as your heroes, the human heroes or the other kind of heroes, are doing stuff around the walls, dealing with monsters and enemies and other kind of treachery that is coming out, while you see the ends tearing down and destroy the place and opening a breach for you to gain access to Saruman. It's a phenomenally vivid narrative. I loved it. And then finally you have the confrontation with your arch enemy, and I do not want to tell you anything about what it does. I'm not going to show you the card. Okay, I can't resist. I'll show at least the art. Because I don't want to spoil things for you, what it does, what are the conditions that you have to meet. He is one devious son of an orc, trust me. And in general, you having this climax confrontation after a scenario that starts slow and nice with a conversation with your green friends, reaches a new level with this collective action, with this war action, and then culminates in a fight with your archenemy. It really creates an intense and very exciting narrative, very exciting sense of progression. I liked it. I liked this expansion a lot. As I said, the first scenario, the one where you cannot use all of your heroes, I found it a little weaker, but that may just be my personal thing. It seems, I believe that not all players are as bothered by this as I am. As you know, I have mixed feelings about deck selecting and creating decks before you start a game. I used not to like it so much. With Lord of the Rings, the card game, I like it a lot, but I guess there's still a residue of my previous skepticism towards the idea, so that when I did all the work and I cannot use all of my heroes, something is triggered in me. Maybe my personal thing is just something that weakens the first scenario a little bit in my eyes. But then the other two are so unique, so flavorful, so full of narrative, so different from other scenarios that I played, that those alone speaking about the scenarios, and of course you also have some neat cards, probably would be worth the price of admission. You get 2 scenarios that are excellent, 1 scenario that I think most people will like, even though it's not my favorite one, and some really neat cards here. Legolas I like a lot, the new Ent, the quick Ent just adds more capability, more flexibility. That's something I hadn't seen in Ents before. The quickness, there will be some challenge to create decks that maximize the ability of the 2 new heroes, but it can be done. And the new Fellowship hero is really fun to have and powerful and gives you a lot of flexibility. And again, what it brings is a sense of like flexible leadership that increases the ability of other heroes to perform actions. The new cards and 2 of the scenarios, A+. One of the scenarios, A- in my mind, probably A for most other people. All in all, however, a very good expansion. I enjoyed every minute of it that I played. Some I could have enjoyed more, but I enjoyed everything that I found in this scenario. Treason of Saruman, 3rd expansion in the Saga line of expansions for Lord of the Rings, the card game. Stay tuned, and in the future I will keep traveling through the Saga expansions and sharing my opinions and ideas about the expansions with you.